Today we'll continue with the group properties. In the previous lecture we have discussed two factors. The first one was two factors, yes. The first one it was the second one it was the norms, and at the beginning we have discussed the rule. Okay, now we are going to continue with those properties. We are going to discuss the status, size, in addition to cohesiveness. Okay, now let us start with the third element here, which is status. Okay, when we talk about status, here we are talking about some sort of social defined position, either of the group among other groups or of the individual among other members of the same group. So when we talk about status, again, we are talking about a socially defined position, again, either of the group among other groups or of an individual within a group among other group members. So when we talk about status and we talk about this social defined position, we are talking about some sort of hierarchy or ranking of different individuals within a group. There are people in higher ranks than others, and vice versa, of course. Here we must not confuse status with the rule. Okay, there is some sort of relation, but it is not the same thing. We are talking about two different issues. In the rule, we were talking about an individual within a group. What are the tasks required to be fulfilled by a certain individual? When we are talking about the status, more we are talking about position, and this is more related to authority. In terms of different individuals, what authority they have to manage different people within the same group. Now, there is what is known as the status characteristics theory. According to status characteristics theory, there are three main characteristics here which help individuals to identify their status. Okay. Now, the first one is the power a person has over others. And when you talk about powers, for example, usually leaders, they have more power than followers, for example. People in higher ranks, they have more power because they have more authority than others, and so on. So one of the most important elements which is going to help or which is going to identify the status of individuals within any group, the power they have. When we talk about the power, mostly we are talking about formal issues here, which is going to give individuals some sort of power. Now, the second point is the ability to contribute to group goals, and here more we are talking about skills, competences, and so on. So we have the formal mandate, we can say here, and what are the authorities given to individuals. On the other hand, we have the skills or competences that individuals have and how this is going to contribute to their status among the group. Now, the third point is personal characteristics, or what is known as charisma. Now, some individuals, they have a certain charisma which is helpful for them to, or which is going to facilitate their how can they deal with others, or how can they direct or supervise others, and so on. So here we are talking about, according to status characteristics theory, there are three main elements here. The first one is power, the second one is abilities, competences, etc., and the third one is the personality itself, or the charisma of individuals. Now, those three factors are going to help each individual within a group to identify his or her status, or at least not only to identify how his or her status is going to be perceived by other individuals within the same group. as we can notice here, it is not all a formal issues here. There are issues which is related to the organization itself, where the organization is going to give some sort of power, but also there are issues which is related to individuals. Like, for example, when we talk about the competences, abilities, and so on, and when we talk about the charisma. Now, all those three elements can, again, shape the status of any individual within a certain group. Now, why we study status? Because there is some sort of effect here for status on different issues. We are going to discuss some of the most important issues. Earlier in a previous lecture, we have studied norms. Okay. Now, when we talk about norms and conformity, here we expect that there should be some sort of effect for status on norms and conformity. Okay. Yani, for example, it is expected that individuals with high status, okay, that they do not show same or they do not comply to at the same level to norms, for example, as other people with lower status. Okay. Also, it was noticed, according to different researches, that individuals with high status sometimes they show some sort of deviant workplace behaviors, but to a limit which is not going to violate the objectives or goals of the group. Yani, as we can understand here, that there is some sort of, we can say, a space for people with high status, okay, but this space is not open all the way. It is to an extent or to a certain limit where it should not violate the group ability to achieve its goals and objectives. Okay. Of course, also when we talk about interaction, it was noticed that people with high level status, they were more assertive. More assertive, it means that they are decisive when they need to take a decision, they take it, and not necessarily decision when they command or supervise others. They were very decisive and assertive without talking much or discussing much of the issues. Okay, and of course those are expected to be in some cases negative issues here, which is related to status, how it is going to affect some those issues like norms, conformity, group interaction. Also, it was noticed according to researchers that whenever there are high differences or huge differences between status, it means whenever there is a gap, huge gap between higher level status and lower level status, less diversity in ideas was available. There was less discussions. People in lower status, they were less willing to contribute with their ideas about a certain situation or solutions and so on. And that's why we said that there was a limited diversity of ideas contributed by people with a lower status. And also this means that the creativity is limited here. On the other hand, now another issue is equity. Also, it was noticed that whenever the status differences here perceived by individuals as inequitable, there was some sort of corrective behaviors. And we can understand that earlier we have discussed that whenever there is some sort of inequity, there is tension, and people always tend to reduce the tension. In order to reduce the tension, individuals are going to take different measures, which we consider it as corrective measures. Now, up to what extent those measures are matching with accepted behavior or not, this is another issue, but individuals are going here to correct the situation in order to reduce tension. Okay. Now, as we have noticed, there is an effect for status over different issues related to individuals' behavior, and this means that status is going to affect behavior, and if it is going to affect behavior, it means that it is going to affect performance. And this is the key issue when we discuss those properties. Earlier we said that we need to always find the relation between those elements and the performance of individuals within any organization. Now, another property here is size. Of course, when we talk about size, in simple words, we are talking about number of group members. Okay, now groups are usually characterized or classified into two types of groups. One of the classification according to size: small groups and large groups. Now, there is no standard, we can say, but according at least to the textbook that we are dealing with, here we can say that whenever there is more than 12 individuals, we consider the group as large. Whenever the opposite, 7 or fewer, here we talking about a small group, and if it is between 7 and 12, we are talking about medium-sized group. But again, to be clear about this point, it is not a standard. The issue of size, there is no standard for the size. But of course, we are going to discover in this chapter and in the coming chapter that smaller groups are more efficient. This is an important issue, but sometimes in order to accomplish a certain assignment, we need a large group. It depends about the assignment itself and what are the requirements in terms of human resources needed to fulfill or accomplish the assignment. But again, when you talk about size, we are talking about number of individuals within a certain group. Of course, which is best use of groups when we talk about small or large, this table is going to give us some sort of comparison. Like when we talk about speed, it is expected that smaller groups are faster. Why? Why smaller groups are faster?
Maybe because this would reduce the conflicts among the group members. Less conflicts mean that they are able to make decisions.
Okay, but usually the potential for conflicts among smaller groups is higher. Yeah, because the interaction is more. When we talk about, if you are 5 friends together, the potential for a problem between one and another, it is 1 to 5. But if you are 2 all the time together, the potential here is 1 to 2. So we are talking about more potential. Usually, it's not necessarily, but the potential for problems among smaller groups, it is usually higher because the level of interaction usually is higher. The more there are individuals, the less there are other problems. But if you are talking about this point in specific, okay? But the smaller number, it means that the communication is easier, okay? And the flow of information, for example, it is easier. And supervision, it is also easier, and so on. So we are talking about some conditions here which is going to facilitate accomplishing the work in shorter periods of time. Individuals' performance is expected also to be better in smaller groups. Why? Because in smaller groups the rules are very clear. Exactly, assignments and tasks also are very specified here, and it is the level of interaction between smaller groups also is expected to be higher, okay? But when you talk about larger groups, problem solving is expected to be much better than smaller groups. Why? Why in larger groups problem solving is expected to be much better than smaller groups? Yes?
Because in the smaller groups, as we said, we have a high interaction between the members. So I think that they won't contribute that much into problem solving, and everyone who has his own ideas and opinions, which makes that he will control maybe his opinion and he wants it.
Okay, but we said that performance level of small when we talk about individual performance, and of course when we talk about overall performance at the end, we are going to find also that smaller groups have higher overall performance. Yes? Exactly. Here we are talking about a contribution of more ideas. We have more individuals, different ways of thinking, backgrounds are different, experiences are different, and so on. And that's why it is expected that their ability in problem solving is much better. More than one opinion, more than two. We are talking about here a mixture of opinions. And sorry, also here, when you talk about, it is related here, the diverse input, because as I have mentioned already, here we are talking about different experiences, we are talking about different competences also, ways of thinking and so on, and all this is going to add some sort of diversity to the group. Of course, and this is going to enhance those 3 points somehow are related. We are talking about fact-finding goals. It is going to be much better when we talk about larger groups. One of the most important features of larger groups, we are talking about different backgrounds, experiences, ideas, and this diversity is expected to contribute positively to a group ability. But again, when we talk about smaller groups, there are other characteristics related to communication, flow of information, for example, interaction. Also, when we talk about supervision among smaller groups, it is easier and more effective comparing it to larger groups. There are we can say pros and cons for each point when we talk about small or large groups. Now, still we are talking about size. One of the problems which is associated with a group working is what we call social loafing. Now, when you talk about social loafing here, we are describing one of 2 situations. The first one is the tendency of individuals to contribute or to exert less effort. Okay. Now here, when of course there are 2 reasons. I mean here for social loafing. But again, when you talk about social loafing, we are talking about individuals exerting less effort to a group work. Okay, and of course this is harmful for any group because usually among groups we expect that there should be some sort of members depending on each other because each individual is having a certain role, and here we are talking about integration of those rules in order to contribute to the final assignment. Now, when you talk about social loafing, we have 2 reasons here which is going to cause social loafing. One of those is concerns of equity. Sometimes when people feel that they are treated unfairly, they are going to exert less effort. Okay, and this is one of the reasons. Now, the second reason is what we call free riders or diffusion of responsibility. In large groups, usually some people, they depend more than they should on other individuals. Okay, that's why in any group, the number of individuals should match to the requirements of the assignment. Okay. Now, the more there are individuals who are unneeded, the more we are going to see here free riders. Why? Because I can depend on X of people because he have nothing to do. He might do something which I should do, or somehow, something similar to that. So here we have 2 reasons again. One of those is feeling of inequity, and this is going to, in some cases, make some people exert less effort. And sometimes we are talking about diffusion of responsibilities, or what is here what we describe or we call free riders, those people who are going to depend on others to accomplish their assignments. Okay, how to reduce social loafing? How to reduce social loafing among groups? Yes.
Maybe by giving each group member a specific responsibility.
Okay, this is one of the points when you talk about authority and how authority is allocated for each individual, or how each individual is assigned for some authorities. This is one of the reasons. What else? This is also one of the mechanisms that we can use. But let me ask a question. Social loafing, it is going to appear more in smaller or larger groups? In larger groups. So the smaller the group, it is an advantage. But as I said earlier, that sometimes we need larger groups, okay, to accomplish a certain assignment. Here we come to the basic concept, I can say here, that there is no limit to a group members, though there are more advantages for smaller groups. But again, we need group members according to the size of the assignment, okay? So we cannot reduce the number because there are advantages for smaller groups, because sometimes we need larger number than an extent or than a certain limit. Again, here let us talk about some of the managerial applications to reduce social loafing among different groups. One of the issues here is individual accountability. And when we talk about accountability, here we are talking about determining authority in very clear manner, having, for example, job descriptions where duties are identified clearly. There are performance indicators which is identified by the organization. For example, for individuals, authority is also identified in very clear manner. So this way we can have some sort of accountability, and it is important to enhance individual accountability. Because when you talk about social loafing, we are not talking about a group social loafing. We are talking about some individuals who tend to reduce their efforts or exert less efforts. So here we need to increase individual accountability in order to reduce social loafing. One of the issues also, or some of the issues that we can do to prevent social loafing, set group goals in very clear manner, because this is going to help the group to develop plans. In those plans there are tasks assigned for different individuals. Rules are identified. Increase intergroup competition, and we can do that using a reward system to appreciate individuals' performance among the group. Also, we can use peer evaluation, give a chance to group members to evaluate each other and give weight for that evaluation. This is going also to help in reducing social loafing. And one of the important issues is to distribute group rewards based on individual effort. Okay, if the assignment finally is fulfilled, not necessarily that all group members are going to be rewarded. Some of the group members might be rewarded less, or they might not be rewarded because their contribution was limited, or there was no contribution. Anyway, also when we talk about group rewarding, we are not talking here about equal rewards. We are talking about rewards according to the job role, assignment, task, etc. So this way we can enhance the competition among the group. We can also influence how individuals are going to deal with their assignments, to force them more to take into consideration their duties related to the assignment. Okay. Any questions till now? One more property we need to discuss, which is cohesiveness. Okay. Of course, when you talk about cohesiveness, here we are talking about one of the most important elements, which is going to, or which should enhance the performance of individuals or groups in general. We consider that the more the group is cohesive, the more the performance level is higher. Usually, cohesive groups are more able to solve their problems, for example, even if they are small groups, okay? But their ability to deal with the problems, whether it is personal problems or professional problems, usually it is higher, Okay. Again, when we talk about cohesiveness, usually cohesive groups are more agreeing on goals, plans, and so on. Usually, again, this is one of the most, we are talking about 5 elements, which is all important, but maybe relatively, when we talk about cohesiveness, it is relatively more important comparing it to other points. Now, when we talk about cohesiveness here, we're talking about up to what extent group members are attracted to each other. Attracted, we mean here they have strong relation with each other. The more the relation is tight, the more here we say that this is a cohesive group. Now, if the group is the opposite, here we are talking about a group where there are a lot of problems, there are communication problems, interaction problems, supervision problems, etc. And this means that the performance of such groups is going to be very low. So cohesiveness is one of the points here. In order to increase cohesiveness, there are some advices, of course, here. One of the most important, of course, is having smaller groups. But again, I don't want to repeat always the same point. Not all the times we can use smaller groups. But if we can, it is better. Of course, there are more advantages when we talk about smaller groups. Smaller groups are more cohesive than larger groups. Also, it is important to encourage agreement with group goals. That's why when we were discussing group formation models, we said that at the beginning usually there is time and space to discuss issues related to group goals, objectives, to design a plan, and so on. The more the group here are agreeing on the goals and objectives, the more they believe on the final objective, and this means that the relation is stronger between group members. Of course, the more the group members they spend time together, the more they are going to understand each other more. As they are going to understand their strengths, also they are going to understand their weaknesses. And this is going to help them to know, for example, if I know one of my colleagues what things are going to upset him, I should avoid those things, for example, okay? Or if there are issues which is going to cause him some problems, I'm going to try to help my colleague and so on. So the more those individuals as group members spend time together, the more they understand each other and the more they are able to reduce level of problems, and at the same time the more they can resolve any problem that they are going to face. Also, if the group admission is difficult, people are going to feel the importance of being members of a certain group, and this usually is going to make individuals appreciating being members, and they are going to do their best in order to maintain their membership and so on. So increasing group status and admission difficulty is helpful also to increase cohesiveness among the group members. Competition with other groups also, it is going to develop some sort of identity to group members, and they are we can say they are going to be more proud being members of a certain group, and this also is going to influence cohesiveness in a positive way. Of course, there are other points like rewards, for example, in addition to physically isolate the group. But when you talk about physically isolate the group, we are not talking about totally isolating the group. Communicating with other groups, coordination with other groups is very important, because after all we are talking about integrated firm where there are different groups and teams, but at the end we are talking about here an integrated efforts to accomplish the firm strategy in general. Okay, I need to go back to the issue of rewards. Okay, here there is it seems that there is some sort of contradiction between rewards, how we are talking about rewards in this point, and how we have discussed rewards in the previous point. In the previous point, we said that give group rewards based on individual performance or effort. Okay. Here we are saying that give rewards to the group, not to individuals. But giving rewards to a group, but not to individuals, it does not mean not considering individual performance. It means surely 100% considering individual performance. But at the end, in order to have a reward, you must accomplish the assignment as a group. After accomplishing the assignment as a group, you are going to be rewarded, but you are not going to be rewarded equally, not necessarily at least. You are going to be rewarded according to your contribution, to your performance, to your effort, and so on. So there is no contradiction here between this point and the previous point. Here we are talking about the same point, but it is the explanation which is going to help us to understand more. Again, we give rewards for groups, but based on individuals' contribution or performance. Okay. Now, we said that cohesiveness is important for performance. Here we need to identify the relation between cohesiveness and performance norms. Okay, it is expected that whenever there is high cohesiveness and high performance norms, that performance is going to be, of course, there is high productivity or high performance. And this is very normal because we are talking about a very cohesive group and we are talking about high performance norms. Okay, but when we talk about low cohesive group and with high performance norms, we are talking about moderate productivity. Though that there is high performance norms, but the relation between group members is not very strong. We have low cohesiveness, and this means that there are more problems. Those problems are going to affect productivity. Now, why, when we talk about low cohesive groups and low performance norms, we are talking about low productivity? Low cohesive and low performance norms, we are talking about low productivity. Sorry, when we talk about high cohesiveness, okay. When we talk about high cohesiveness and low performance norms, we are talking about low productivity.
Because even if they are just like each other, the members in the group and every group, but they just don't exert any efforts or performance, so it's
and it is like if they agree on not exerting effort and performance and so on. So they are agreeing on that. That's why the performance is going to be low. Now, why in low cohesive groups and low performance norms, we expect sometimes not low productivity, sometimes it might be moderate productivity. Why in low cohesive groups with low performance norms, sometimes the performance is much better than high cohesive groups with low performance norms?
When the low cohesive groups, we said that these people are not in harmony. So maybe they are like in competition, for example, even if they do not have the same norms, but there are conflicts among them because everyone is trying to be better than the other, and this may reflect on the productivity or something.
What else might be? What other reasons? When you talk about low cohesive groups, we are talking about higher individualism here, okay? And some individuals, they are going to work alone, on their own, okay? And those individuals, they might exert maximum effort because this is their ability, their nature. They want to, okay? Unlike other members of the groups. That's why we expect sometimes whenever there is low cohesiveness, even if the performance level is lower, that sometimes the performance might be not low, it might be moderate. Why? Because some individuals within the group, they are going to exert maximum effort because that's how they are. Okay. Now, when you talk about high cohesive group with low performance norms, we are talking here about totally agreeing on not exerting any effort. Okay. But there, as I have mentioned, the individualism is obvious because each one is doing what he or she likes or want, and that's why some individuals, they exert more effort than others. Maybe there might be some sort of competition, but at least there is going to be high level of individualism among those group members, and again, that's why some individuals, they are going to exert more effort. كبي يعطيكم العافية.